This is a reading from the book of Ecclesiastes, from the 3rd chapter, verses 1 through 8. For everything there is a season, and a time for every matter under heaven, a time to be born and a time to die, a time to plant and a time to pluck up that which is planted, a time to kill and a time to heal, a time to break down and a time to build up, a time to weep and a time to laugh, a time to mourn and a time to dance, a time to throw away stones and a time to gather stones together, a time to embrace and a time to refrain from embracing, a time to seek and a time to lose, a time to keep and a time to throw away, a time to tear and a time to sow, a time to keep silence and a time to speak, a time to love and a time to hate, a time for war and a time for peace.
Good morning. I'm glad to be with you today, whatever with you means in this context. This sermon is a little bit dismal at the beginning, so please bear with me. This is such a strange, uncertain season of our lives. Each person's experience of this time is different. Some shelter in place alone, some sometimes too close, some unhoused, some glad to work at home, some working but having to teach and care for children. Some live this strange time as essential workers, experiencing COVID-19 deaths and exposures. Some teachers weigh unsafe working conditions. Some children are longing for friends and school. Some are in prison. Some are filing for divorce. Some domestic workers have no unemployment. Some who have had COVID linger in symptoms that continue. Some are in isolation in ICUs and nursing homes. Some are of an age with only a small percentage of a lifetime left. And I wonder if they wonder, will I spend it all like this? Will I spend it all closed up in my house, waiting for a vaccine? And we all, most of us, wait for a vaccine. The other day, I walked along San Pablo through Albany and El Cerrito. So many shuttered businesses. Uncertainty increases as we let go of the idea that this is temporary. Maybe we feel like the poet T.S. Eliot does. I said to my soul, be still and wait without hope, for hope would be hope of the wrong thing. Our social poverties come into relief. Poor health care entwined with race inequalities, under-resourced public health, an administration that has sat in denial as the virus claims more lives. And revealed too are a whole host of difficult feelings. Angst, lament, confusion, grief, dread of loss, dread of death, stress, depression, worry, vulnerability, aimlessness, disappointment at a canceled vacation, disappointment at not being able to go to school, resignation, loneliness. And then there is this. Some children I'm close to, siblings, who have been squabbling for their entire lives, have, since being stuck with each other for months, become friends. They ride bikes together, play games, laugh. And this. On Monday, the San Francisco Symphony released in a Zoom rendition of Rossini's 1812 Overture. So energetic, the full orchestra, playing some in their living room, some in pajamas, some in parks, and their children and pets leap, crawl, dance, jump on the furniture, all carefully choreographed. A toddler chases ducks. A trumpeter rides a bike while playing. One vacuums an apparently blissful cat while also playing the trumpet. As the music unfolded, I found myself alone and laughing aloud, moved at seeing beloved faces of the players who can't enter the concert hall. It was the love of the players for each other that moved me, their determination to create together. This is also a strange time for time itself, at once fast and slow. I keep hearing, what day is this? What month? The days have unnumbered themselves. Was that in April or June that I cut my hair over the sink? In a time of uncertainty, how are the days to be lived? How much doom scrolling is too much? What about the election? What's a futile gesture? What not? What's about the dishes? Does one need to do them? Do I need to wear something besides pajamas? When will this be over? Will there ever be normal again? And what about the Black Lives Matter demonstrations? Will we be moved as a society to change? Am I moved? The Romantic poet John Keats came up with an idea he called negative capability. Negative doesn't mean being negative, angry, judgmental. Keats had just taken care of his brother as he died of tuberculosis. During that time, Keats also contracted tuberculosis, and he would die of it not too long after he wrote the words I'm about to read. He was poor, uncertain of what was ahead. Negative capability, he says, is when one is capable of being in uncertainties, mysteries, doubts, without any irritable reaching after certainty. Negative capability means cultivating the fluid space, the spiritual capacity to fully belong to the world as it is, in its elusive meanings and uncertain motion. The text from Ecclesiastes is familiar. We heard it not too long ago. A verse leapt out at me this week, and maybe for you today too. There is a time to embrace and a time to refrain from embracing. The coronavirus exists and spreads via our very best relational realities. Embracing, laughing, singing, congregating. And we are congregationalists. It's what we do. There are grandparents among us who have not yet held their new grandbabies. Single people who haven't been touched by a human for 5 months. We are sustained by each other's love, the embrace one of its purest forms. And we are in a season of refraining from embracing. As the week progressed, the text's phrase, "a time to die," sounded a particularly harsh note after the explosion in Beirut and amid the daily toll of COVID-19. Then into focus came a time to build up and a time to break down. The tenacity of nonviolent demonstrators in Portland and elsewhere reminds us that breaking down and building up can be part of the same creative dynamic. And then the verse, "a time to kill and a time to heal," sounds different to me because it could happen simultaneously. COVID infection could be killed so a human could heal. These contrasts of kinds of time aren't necessarily at separate times or mutually exclusive. This song about time we sang is descriptive rather than prescriptive. It is not about how our time should be. Rather, it names how things are with time, reality in its full range, including hate and war and not embracing. It's attributed to King Solomon, as is the Song of Songs, who wasn't a prophet. His writing doesn't call us to a specific action. It isn't about social justice. And this poem names without judging. It is like this, to be alive. Solomon is befriending time, facing reality. It's a kind of anti-denial text. The Black lesbian poet Audre Lorde says, "We can be more conscious of living as a situation to be experienced and interacted with." The idea is to become more conscious of what exists. Time seems abstract, but it's not. My coffee gets cold as I work on a sermon. Nor is time invisible. Each human foot landing in that place for centuries has worn the stone steps of the cathedral to quarter moons. Time is visible, part of a life story, told in fading fabric. The sun-bleached tent of a person who has lived many seasons in it on the freeway interchange. Time is visible in a child's ice cream cone melting, the tree growth exposed in rings when a tree is cut. Healing also belongs to the passage of time. A raw wound goes to a scar. Time, in fact, is a necessary part of the motions of becoming, of growth and change and decay. Beauty, terror, and the arc of justice bend through time toward change and creation. Michelangelo's David slowly emerges from his block of marble. The causes of global climate change accrue. The Voter Rights Act blooms after years of nonviolent marches of the civil rights movement. And during the 1918-1919 pandemic, the women's vote arrived, preceded by decades of actions, first-wave feminists. They are called movements because they enter into history, then move, develop through time. Music moves through time. It unfolds as it is heard and played. What is music without time's passage? It's nothing. T.S. Eliot writes again of those moments when we ourselves become part of the music, unfolding through time. He says, "Music heard so deeply that it is not heard at all, but you are the music while the music lasts." John Lewis, as he was dying, wrote a message to be published in the New York Times on the day of his funeral, and they did it. He belonged to the almost gone generation who never abandoned the beloved community. And he closed his message with the phrase, "Let the power of the everlasting love be your guide." What is the power of everlasting love? John Lewis clearly embodied the motion of love opening the world wider through time. And he didn't say, "Let eternal life be your guide." Lewis says the power of everlasting love. And I like that everlasting word. Not the same as eternal, as in having always existed outside of or beyond time. That's eternal. Rather, everlasting comes into being, into time and history, and then doesn't perish. The power of everlasting love is the from this day forward of marriage. It enters time at a certain point and unfolds amid reality. It travels through time with us. John Lewis understands everlasting love requires unfolding time, that God's revelation requires time. Jesus' life and ministry entered history, and the aftermath of that particular human life has played out through many centuries and still plays out today. I will say that Jesus is not eternal. Rather, Jesus is everlasting, alive through time. And John Lewis thinks we can be guided by the power of everlasting love. As with music, love's unfolding is always through time and always embodied. Whose love is everlasting for you? Unfolding in and with, through your life. What human, alive or not, parent, child, friend, stranger, continues teacher maybe, continues to unfold in you the power of their love, perhaps enough for a lifetime. Or maybe you have everlasting love unfolding through you for another person. On the day I met my nephew at 4 days old, I sat down with him in my arms and we stared at each other for 45 minutes and really have never stopped. That gaze unfolds between us for life. A love started that day. We have choices about how to live this strange time we share. Uncertainty plays out through our minds and bodies, days and months, communities, institutions, the economy. Maybe it's possible to embrace uncertainty, to have the negative capability to abide with uncertainty of John Keats, and to be available to the guidance by what John Lewis calls the power of everlasting love. For Keats, valuing uncertainty lets the creative power of love unfold through time into, for him, the making of a poem, into the creative process, into a silly, powerful video, an orchestra rather than fighting uncertainty when they might not be able to re-enter their concert hall for a long time, decides to fluidly play with each other, making music for themselves and the audience even while in isolation. To be capable of not striving after certainty is to fully belong to the world as it is, to belong to everlasting love, unfolding through time, and to belong to the possibility of new creation. This uncertainty isn't going away for a while. Living it without craving normality or control can open in us a negative capability, cultivate in our lives a capacity for mystery, a capacity for the discomforts of social change and of the vulnerabilities of authentic relationship, a capacity to fully enter the creative processes of our own lives. Put another way, the divine power of everlasting love, unfolding through time in this uncertain season of history, can be our guide for the living of these days. Amen.